any of my board members? Okay, at this time, we're going to move to reports, discussion items, starting with Doug Wick.
So, President Cruz, members of the board, last board meeting you asked that our financial advisor, Doug Witt, come on and answer questions and about the tax rate overview. I think I have provided him with your preliminary questions, but he is ready to answer any questions that you have regarding tax rate. And I will remind you that at the 18th meeting is when we will talk about the maintenance loan. That will not be today, but if you have general questions, because we haven't given Doug the final number, because we want to talk to you guys about it tonight, he won't have specifics, but he will answer any financial questions you have. So welcome, Doug.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, Ms. Booth, I think I can share my screen and kind of talk about the two components of the tax rate and the two options. And then from there, if you would like me to preview a little bit of cash flow analysis about potential general operating financings, I'm happy to share that tonight or at the next meeting whenever it's appropriate for you all.
Because of the,
But
because of the agenda item, I'd rather you wait till the next meeting to talk about the, well, you're talking generally as long as you're not talking specific dollars, because it's not on the, but it does affect our tax rate. So as long as you relate it to the tax rate, that's on the agenda, that's what's on the agenda. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Thank you,
That's
sir.
fair. And it's an informational item this evening. So, okay, well, let me hit share and see if I can pull up a few schedules. Can you all see this okay? There's a lot of data points, but I'll be able to scroll to them. But can you see this at the top that says historical statistics?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Can,
Let's see. I can get it to expand.
Doug, we're missing column 1, so yeah, we're going to have to do something.
There you go. Okay, so there's a lot of data on here. Those of you that's seen the workshop from me in the past know that we track your taxable value, we track your average daily attendance, we track your wealth per average daily attendance, your maintenance and operating tax rate history, your INS tax rate history, and your INS and general fund balance history. And tonight, I think some of the questions are related to, we're entering into budget season and tax rate setting season, etc. So kind of what is a little bit of background and what are some of the flexibility and options that we have going forward. So on the first line here, this is 2005-2006. The district for the maintenance and operating side was at $1.50 and 14 cents of INS tax rate. So the $1.50 at the time was the maximum. This is what I call the first round of tax compression, where we went from $1.50 to $1.37 and from $1.37 to $1.04. And of course, your INS tax rate is under a different set of rules, a different set of laws, etc. And it has an ability to be set by the local trustees, whereas in many cases our M&O rate is dictated by the state law. So $1.50 compressed down to $1.04. Your INS was in the 14 and 15 cent range for much of this period. Then we get to this year here, which is 2014-15, and your M&O rate stayed at $1.04, and your voters approved additional bonds that elevated the INS tax rate to 31.5 cents. During that time period, your tax base went up and grew, and your maintenance and operating tax rate obviously stayed the same because that's what the funding formula dictates. And even with increased taxable values in local districts due to appraised values increasing, it does not mean that we as a school district get any more money. Actually, it just shifts the local and state share of our operating funding more to the local share and less to the state share. So the state benefits from our rising property values. But like every other district, you maintain your M&O tax rate at the $1.04. During this time period where it compressed from $1.50 to $1.04, there's no ability for any district in Texas to go above $1.04 without a tax ratification election. So you're frozen at $1.04 unless you present it to the voters. In 2018-19, you presented to your voters what some people summarize and call it a swap and drop. I'm not really a big fan of that term, but you presented to your voters an opportunity to raise the M&O rate by 2 pennies while you were dropping your INS rate by 3 pennies. So a net decline of 1 penny, resulting in $1.06 and $23.85. The 23 cents, 24 cents was well below what was projected to the voters back in this day. And so you got to $1.06, you got to $23.85, and then here comes the second round of tax compression that is ongoing. Whereas the first round was a 2-year process, this one here is ongoing. It's been going on for 4 years, $1.06 to 99 to 93 to 88 to 86.5 cents. It will continue with most all proposals that are in Austin as we speak. So you do not and will not have any discretion as a school board over what rate that you set on the M&O going forward without a tax ratification election, or they now call it a value-added tax ratification election. So as you go through your budget, kind of the funding formulas and the tax rate will not be at your discretion, it will be fixed. And so here, some people called this $1.04 to $1.06 golden pennies, because the 2 pennies not only collected local revenues from the 2-cent increase, but it collected additional state revenues and bonus money for that, so they were considered golden pennies going from $1.04 to $1.06. The timing of that was actually good, because it's better to start at $1.06 before the tax rate compression began than it would have been if you stayed at $1.04. So kudos to you all for having that take place prior to this. But there's no real concept of local board discretion for golden pennies or copper pennies or any other pennies. We literally will get a mandate as to where the 86 cents is going from here to next year. On the INS side, you can see here that we got to the 23.85 cent INS tax rate, and you appropriately maintain that tax rate, even if it meant the INS fund balance was going to go up some, which it did, and then you used it here in the drop in the INS fund balance. So this is my INS fund balance column. The INS fund balance added to at 23.85 cents, and then we utilized it for early debt retirement here. So we purposely drew it down, and by keeping the 23.85 cents again, you're on the northbound trajectory for this. And if you will keep this 23.85 steady over the next year and the year after that and so forth, pending the outcome of a positive bond election, it will allow you INS fund balance to pay down on existing bonds, assuming that the law does not change. That is, of course, an underlying assumption, which allows us to set the INS tax rate at a level that pays for principal and interest on or before it's due, and the or before it's due allows us to prepay on some outstanding bonds. So let me pull up that schedule. So here is your outstanding voted bond debt service, a 2011 small refunding that matures in 26. The 2014 building bond has been refunded, so its payments go away next year. The 2016 refunding bond is real short, And then the bulk of your bond portfolio is in a Series 2020 refunding where you refinanced and paid off bonds early that lowered the debt service cost on this substantially, saved the district a ton of interest cost money, and provided for payments that were at the $6.5 million range through 23, with built-in bond capacity beginning in 24 and thereafter. So you're at a flat payment of $3,972,000, which is a good flat payment. So as your tax base grows, and if your tax rate stays the same, you will collect more revenues, and those more revenues can be used to shorten and pay off bonds early rather than waiting to pay them off in 2044. And you've utilized that technique over the past several years, again, in the 2020 timeframe shown here. So, no options really on M&O budget, some discretion on the INS budget. Do you go to lowering the tax rate, or do you go to maintaining that tax rate to pay bonds off early, knowing that you have facility needs that will have to be addressed through the INS tax rate, because the M&O tax rate and the M&O tax rate compression provides limited to no discretion in the general operating fund to build buildings. So any questions, Ms. Booth, from the board about the maintenance and operating or INS tax rate options?
I have one. So our best option was just to leave our tax rate the same.
I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so I didn't hear it very good.
It's to our benefit to leave the tax rate the same. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Livingston asked? You're still not hearing me.
That there's very little discretion, that you stay the same?
Well, who has the microphone? Where is it? Where's he not here? Greg, can you repeat the question, please? For that camera. Yeah, just speak louder. Just say, Mr. Livingston asked, please.
The question is it to our benefit to keep the tax rate on the INS side the same?
Yes, in my opinion, you could obviously have someone argue for something else, but in my opinion, by maintaining the INS tax rate at a level basis is beneficial to the district for the following reasons. Number one, it allows you to pay down on outstanding bonds early. It allows you to maintain some stability in your tax rate that we don't get on this side. And furthermore, whether, I don't know that this is a political statement, but as an observer, you have facility needs that will need to be addressed in this district, probably for the preference of most of you in the room in the near term, but certainly for the district in the near to medium term. There's no way of escaping that you will have to build facilities and improve facilities in your district. And when you do, by maintaining this tax rate and paying down on existing bonds early, and providing stability to this tax rate, what it takes to address the facility needs from a tax rate standpoint will be a much more minor change than it would if we lowered this, for example, by 10 pennies. So, if you're asking my opinion, yes, it is beneficial to the district economically by lowering outstanding bonded indebtedness and the interest cost on that. And it's also beneficial from a standpoint of stability of the overall tax rate.
Thank you, sir.
We have, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we do have some districts where when this 93 cents went to 88 cents, they raised this 23 cents to 28 cents, keeping this total tax rate the same. You have been generous to your taxpayers by compressing the tax rate along with the compression of this.
So that was one of the questions we had originally, was if our tax rate compresses, do we have the ability to raise the INS budget or tax rate without a voter approval?
Yeah, so the voters approved, that is correct. This tax rate is set each and every year by the trustees. The underlying bonds
in the county.
have to be approved by the voters.
So,
Given that you have outstanding bonds with a stated repayment of this term, but the ability to prepay on the bonds beginning in 2030, you can accelerate these payments either by early redemption in 2030 or by early defeasance, is a special term that we use, in 2023 to 2030. So you have the ability to pay these bonds off with the tax rate. So if you said, we want to keep the tax rate the same to pay down on these bonds on a small scale, you have that option. If you say, we want to pay down on this on a bigger scale, you have the option that you just described, which is you have the discretion to set and levy the INS tax rate under current law at a level that you see fit as a local institution for how you want to manage your outstanding indebtedness.
so that was one of the things that came up in our bond election, was that we presented, so many millions of dollars for our bond, but we were only raising the tax rate by 3 pennies. So how could we do that? So there was a lot of discussion about how we were hiding that we were going to absorb that a big portion of that bond into our tax rate because we could, with the extension of our debt, because our rate was high. So there was a lot of discussion about how we could have just lowered the INS rate, and then, just the transparency piece is what people were saying. Like, you're not being transparent because you're not stating to the voters that you could actually lower the rate by 12 cents and you're absorbing 100 million and it doesn't make sense because it's only 3 pennies. And what I tried to tell people was, we still have debt and we still have an obligation to pay the debt. So if we are at the same tax rate, we're going to collect that payment. It can't go to anything else but debt. So we're not going to gather all that money, put it in our pockets, and do something with it. We're going to use that money to update our buildings, build new buildings for any kind of growth. So the rate is going to stay the same. It's interesting, though, because I didn't understand at the time that our INS budget could go up if we needed it to pay off debt faster and to also set money aside for future buildings where we wouldn't have any tax impact possibly to our voter. So my question now is, when can we set that INS tax rate? Is that usually when we set the entire rate when that comes out?
Yes, you set it. You set it when you get your certified values in late July, and then you set it at some time thereafter. Generally, for most districts in August, some in September. And you set it at the same time you set your overall tax rate, and at the same time you set your M&O tax rate, and you do it with a publication of your notice of budget hearing and proposed tax rate.
Well,
For a June 30 district, you have an accelerated time frame, shall we say, on setting your budget, because you have to have it done by June 30th. And by June 30th, you probably will not have very good information about what funding laws you're working under.
mm-hmm.
So June 30 districts will have to set a budget by June 30th, but the actual knowledge of what tax rate we can and should set comes at a later date. And so we see June 30s adopt their budget in June, but then adopt their tax rate in August. And for our August 31st districts, sometimes we see them adopt their budget and their tax rate at the same time in August.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to publicly thank you also during the bond. I know I called you a few times just to get explanation, and it it was a lot of information, but you were able to explain it to me in a way that I could understand it. And, you know, I tell people all the time, school finance is so complicated. And, I mean, I had to write it down, I had to read it, I mean, it was, but it is very complicated. People like to, take little pieces of it and make it simple, and it's just not simple. So I appreciate your time coming to explain some stuff to us. Did anybody else have any questions?
Answered all mine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Could you send me that second sheet? I had the first one, I just didn't have the second one. This one that
Yeah,
you're showing.
I can send you the visual that I'm using right now.
Yes, sir.
I think I sent a version of this maybe a couple days ago.
You sent me the first page, but not this page. So the page you showed first. And then just to confirm, the highest we can go up is to the 130?
No, I think it's 50 cents, right, on the INS side?
Technically speaking, you can't go up on this rate on the
Right.
M&O side without voter approval, and you're gonna get another compressed tax rate. On the INS side, technically speaking, your limit is 50 cents.
Okay.
And by the way, there was something said earlier, and I want to stay in my lane, but in most situations, when school districts manage their outstanding debt and their outstanding tax rate in such a manner that over time, they get natural bond capacity to address the next generation of facility needs, but it only has a small impact on the tax rate. In most situations, people applaud you for all of the efforts that you put forward over the prior years to get yourselves in that position. And so, when someone criticizes and says, my gosh, you can do all of this for only 3 cents, and they want to criticize that, that's really be different than the way it should be thought about. That same person or people's thought process, if you did lower this from, say, 26 cents down to 16 cents over the years, and then you were asking to go to 26 cents, those same people would be complaining that 10-cent tax rate increase is too much. So, I don't know what the solution to that is, but debt management that pays down on outstanding bonds and maintains level, consistent tax rate is, generally speaking, very good debt management techniques. And it could put you in a position to do more with less in the future.
Oops, thank you for saying that. And I think we have a lot of people who understand that, but we have a few that just don't. And that's okay. We've just got to do what we can that's best for the district, and it's good to know what avenues we can take for that.
And keep educating.
Yep.
Thank you, Doug.
Okay, thank you all very much. I
Appreciate it.
appreciate the invitation to be with you, and I'll send you the schedules.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, we're going to go to expansion project overview and consider approval of amendment to the professional services agreement.
So Dr. Anderson will be presenting projects as they are defined for the projection, for the growth projection that you ask us to evaluate and to move forward on.
President Cruz, Superintendent Booth, board members, good evening. We want to look this evening at the expansion project scope and overview. All right, there you go. Very good. Fun with technology. So we will look at the project scope first of all, and we talked about this at the last board meeting. You'll remember, we had the visuals on where portables would go, et cetera. This is more of just a higher level overview of the actual cost and the breakdown of those costs and that scope.
Estimated cost.
Estimated cost. And so for the renovation construction, all that I'm about to present is based on a construction beginning in August of 2023. So at the Travis Sixth Grade Center, that would be a renovation of approximately 7,100 square feet of the existing old field house. Some people refer to it as the Boys and Girls Club, but that facility that we talked about last month, to create 6 classrooms in that open space. There's already 2 classrooms in the space, so that gives a total of 8 classrooms in that space, an office and code-compliant restrooms. So there are restrooms there, but they would have to be renovated to become code-compliant. The estimated cost for all of that construction cost is $1,505,200. If you're looking at the in your packet at the summary sheet that is in here. All right. These numbers that I'm giving you, when you add them up, will be the total that is under construction costs. Tried to break it down so you have a general idea of where everything falls. At LP Waters, there's adding 3 multi-user toilet portables, 2 for students and 1 for staff. That includes the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the fire alarms, the paving, the ramps, the stairs, the railings, the awnings, all those things that go with that to be able to have those portables there at an estimated cost of $848,000. At Greenville Middle School, we're adding 4 connected portables, which is 8 classrooms, and a connected restroom to that facility. It also includes the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire alarm, paving, ramp, stairs, railings, awnings, and fencing around that area. And that's an estimated $1,272,000. So that comes out to the total that you see under construction cost in that line.
And are these based on current figures that you
Yes,
came up with, or are these
the
just-
architect and the engineers have submitted this information. They've also looked at it with the estimates that I received on the cost of portables from a vendor that we would be able to use. None of that's in stone at this point. Again, these
No,
are
I understand,
estimates
but this
based
is
on.
based on
Yes, this is based on
current costs
yes,
right
ma'am.
now where we're at with construction.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am, exactly.
With no bids yet, so that's right, so
Right.
that's okay, good.
But that's
Yes,
also with
but-
the architects and
but
the
market, yes.
engineers looking at things that are coming in other districts to see where it's falling based on those costs, so yes. All right, then there's development cost and contingency, and so that comes under the next section that you see on your summary sheet of probable costs. And so that development cost includes professional fees, engineers, consultants, but it also includes things like furnishing, technology, permitting, and other items that it would take to go into those classrooms. So you're going to have whiteboards, bulletin boards, the basic things to make those connected portables truly classrooms for use. And so that estimated cost is $769,672. That also includes in there the structural engineer to do the 2 annual observation reports on the foundation conditions at LP Waters to be able to give us an update on how that structure is holding up. And that would be for the summer of this year and the summer of next year. And then there are other costs that are in there. ACM is basically the asbestos contained material removal. And the field house there at Travis. That is an older facility. Typically you run into asbestos and that has to be handled a certain way. And there's a cost to doing that. Plus an 8% contingency for any other things that may come into play when we go in there. That's $405,590, which brings the total amount to what you see at the bottom of your probable cost sheet of $4,800,461. Any questions about any of that at this point?
If we start this work in August or summer of '23, when we anticipate being complete with it?
The plan is that in January of 2024, the renovation to the T6 facility would be complete. The portables is a little bit more iffy at this point because of, it depends on what the delay is at that point of building those and getting those in. We had talked originally about the most probable is for the beginning of the next school year in 2024. Really the hope is that we would be able to do that sooner, but there's no guarantee on that.
So when you say that, you are including the portable restrooms that are
Yes.
at LP, that they're gonna be that far out?
Yes, we would be able to order those sooner, but there's a lot of other development work that goes into it other than just bringing those in, because it is all of the engineering work, the surveying work, all of the site preparation, as well as having to go back and look at the plumbing issues. And so that does take a while to do that, to spec it, to get that out there, and then and it's going back to the build of those portables. Most of the places that have portables do not have portables sitting out on site to come in. They would have to build those and then be brought on site. Should be able to have that in time for the school year of 2024. Expect it sooner than that, but again, on the safe side, beginning of school in 2024.
But we can still do all the engineering infrastructure and so and waiting on the buildings, because we know the dimensions, we know what they're going to be, we know where we're going to place them. So this will allow us to plan all that. But again, just to repeat, the field house will be finished in January. And we talked Tuesday, I think, as a team to talk about what we would do in January to move people into that, just to make sure that we've got our kids in the right places. But we have places for them now, and then we would move people around again in January if it makes sense for teaching and learning.
All right, should we go to the next slide? I'm sorry, did you have a question?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So there are two items that would need action to move forward with this plan. The first item is the approval of an amendment to the architect's contract, which is AIA G802-2017. That's the name of the document that would be approved. And so back in September of 2020, during that board meeting, the district hired Corrigan as its architectural firm, signed a 5-year agreement with them, and had a base contract that was set that the board approved. What this does is amend that base contract that we have, what we've already negotiated, the attorneys have looked at, and everyone has signed off on, and it amends the scope of the work to what we're looking at here, as well as the costs that are covered in that particular contract. And you should have a copy of that contract in your packet. And so that amended summary is an estimated cost of $187,500 plus the topographical site survey, which is estimated at $3,500. That's actually from a quote or an estimate that was given to Corrigan. The civil proposal is still to be determined on that one because it depends on the scope of everything. The structural engineer, which the 2 visits for a total of $4,000. And then in the contract, there are reimbursables to the architect for making copies for certain trips, things like that. So everything goes back to that original contract as it was agreed upon. So it would be that amendment. And the construction delivery method that the architects are recommending for this particular construction program is competitive sealed proposal. We'll talk about that in a moment, but this whole amendment is based upon a competitive sealed proposal construction method.
when I say it doesn't look like the agreement got put in their
It did not,
packet, so
okay.
maybe you can make a copy when you
You
keep
can make
talking.
it.
The only thing I wanted to say, thank you for that, but just a second, I'm sorry. The only thing I wanted to say is, just as a reminder, we did get the AG's approval that this project does meet the maintenance note loan that we're going to talk to you about on the 18th. So I just wanted to say, the AG has reviewed this, they've approved it as a loan opportunity for our ISD, and recognizes the fact that we had a couple of failed bonds and we have kids coming in. Again, we'll have a demographer report by the end of May, so that will be a June meeting unless y'all want to do a call meeting. So we're growing, our classes are growing, we're at capacity and several classes are over capacity. So the AG has blessed this, and tonight you're giving us permission to let the bids be viewed on this expansion project. That's all we're doing tonight.
Can you explain what the estimated cost at $187,000, what's included with that?
Yes, hold on just one moment. It is basically that you take the total construction cost that's there, the agreement that is initially signed. This is standard across all school districts for a construction project of this size is approximately 7.5% of that cost. But it's going to take in engineering services, it's going to take in their construction services. That's not broken out as being an extra in here. But they kind of have all that under their umbrella, and then it's the 7.5% of that 3,500,000-ish that was in there. And then again, that's in line, that's standard, pretty standard across the industry for school districts. So if you'll go to the next slide. So it's the recommendation of the district that the board approve the amendment to the professional services agreement between owner and architect being Corrigan Associates, AIA document G802-2017, for renovation at Travis and portables added to LP Waters and GMS.
I assume this would come out of fund balance,
It's going to be a loan,
although this,
maintenance loan,
Okay.
yes, sir. Every dollar we talked about tonight would come out of a loan that we'll talk about next time.
Yeah, but we won't vote on that until
yeah.
the next meeting.
That's,
Anybody have any other questions?
I'm sorry. To your point, remember, I think at the last board meeting, Jim stated that the interest rate on this loan equals the interest that we would get. These funds would be deposited in our fund, I'm going to say fund balance, but there's going to be a line item that says this, and we will gain interest on this money, and we will draw it as the bid sheet or payment request comes down. So.
This has been after intense research and looking at all of our buildings after 2 failed bond attempts, and this is where we're at. We have to have something change. We have to update some buildings, and I think we're all in agreement on that.
I agree, we all felt like this was the best of the options that we had to be able to
It's only
meet the needs.
only guaranteed option we got right now. We can't trust another bond.
And it morphed. You know, like when we first came out of the failed bond, it was something different that we were looking at, and it's changed, and we have, because there was, you know, people that didn't like that, and we went back to the drawing board and we looked at something else, and this is hitting all the boxes, yet we feel the most seamless for the kids and the teachers that will be there. Right? Okay.
And this, what we're talking about now is to get us through the next couple of years without, we still gonna need to have that bond issue at some point.
Well, right now they're talking about in legislation to only put bonds forth in election years in November. That would be the only time we could put a bond forth. So if that were the case, I think that we would probably by next year be talking about whether or not we want to go out for a bond in November, because then we would have to wait even 2 more years after that.
Yeah.
So I think we will more than likely consider it maybe after May next year. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve the amendment to the professional service agreement between owner and architect Rogan and Associates AAI, document G802-2017 for renovations at Travis and portables added to LP Boilers and Greenville Middle School as presented.
Second.
With a motion by Roger and a second by Bonnie, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. And then you need another one for the competitive seals?
Yes, so
Okay.
what you pass now allows Corgan to be able to begin the work of doing the schematic designs, et cetera, for this, to be able to put information together so that there can be bids placed on the project, okay? So before they can advertise those bids by law, the board has to vote on a construction method. And so the construction method, again, that they're recommending, it does fall in line with projects of this type, is the competitive sealed proposals. Just so that you understand, the difference between a competitive sealed proposal and a competitive bid is when there's a competitive bid, there's really no negotiation. Lowest bidder wins, and that's it. Competitive sealed proposal, you have the ability to open those, to look at them, and then to see if they actually meet the entire scope, if there's anything that's out of line, to go back and to negotiate if you need to do before you finalize that. It adds a better value to the district to be able to make sure that we're really getting what we've asked for. All right, and so that is what is being recommended. Typically, a construction company comes in, they do that type of bid, they manage the program from beginning to end, and you work with that company to do all of this. And then you move from the estimate to what the actual bid is. It comes back to the board for approval once the bid is there and ready to be accepted.
I move the board approve the competitive seal proposals as a construction delivery method for the renovations at Travis and portables added to LP Waters and GM as presented.
Second.
With a motion by Mike and a second by Bonnie, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Trina? 7-0.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Can you go
Thank
get
you.
copies
Thank
real
you.
quick and bring them back? Thank you,
Yes, I
sir.
will.
Appreciate it.
May I ask something on this note? Is it?
Yes, ma'am.
I would be very interested to see if we could look at the possibility of temporary rolling drones or something for the next school year at LP.
Sure.
To get through. There's some that are very safe, very functional, but I think that going through another whole school year where they're at
Okay.
Is problematic.
Yes. I will tell you that we were talking about that exact setup for possibly another campus. So I think we're already getting bids on that. So yes, we'll look into that and we'll make that happen. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
so at this time, we're moving to the resolution for Greenville ISD Board of Trustees that I had asked Sharon to put together. Bonnie and I and Mike went to training a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about the vouchers. They were doing a small legal update, and I just felt panicked in the moment that we were in there about what was going to happen to public ed if vouchers were going to go through. And I reached out to Sharon and said, how can we send a letter to, just as a representation of our beliefs and what we would like to the state? And the resolution was just like something that came out of that. I don't have a copy of it, so I will read it. Some of the things that I've been reading and some points that have really hit home to me is creating education savings accounts or any voucher-like program would be creating the largest new entitlement in the history of Texas with effectively no accountability or oversight on how that money is spent. We'd be putting Robin Hood or recapture on steroids, same property wealth, fewer students equals more recapture sent to the state. funding schools that are not bound by any state laws on curriculum, materials, books, sports, and more. If legislators value these laws for public schools, a new billion-dollar publicly funded entitlement does nothing but undermine them. Inadvertently funding and amplifying radical and dangerous indoctrination, not education with public dollars. With no accountability, people could qualify for an ESA voucher and openly indoctrinate in their children with ideals of socialism, violence, atheism, hate, diverse sexuality, communism, anti-Semitism, etc. under the false label of education. So with that, I would like to read the resolution that we're going to send, unless somebody would like to read it.
You go right ahead.
Okay.
Did the state vote on that today? That was on the docket to be voted on.
They
In
did
the
vote
House.
on the House, but not in the Senate.
Okay,
And this document will go to the Senate.
And this document will go to the Senate.
okay.
Okay. Board of Trustees, Greenville Independent School District. Resolution, vouchers, education savings accounts, taxpayer saving grants, and other mechanisms that reduce public education funding. Whereas Article 7, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution requires that the Texas Legislature establish and make suitable provisions for the support and maintenance of an efficient system of public free schools. Whereas Texas public school districts accept every student. Whereas education savings accounts and other voucher schemes give private schools, not parents, the right to choose. Whereas Texas public schools adhere to state-mandated academic and financial accountability standards. Whereas private schools are not required to meet the same academic standards as public schools, and they do not report test results, graduation rates, and other performance measures to the public. Whereas schools' choice already exists in the Texas via public school districts, charter schools, inter-dash and intra-district transfers, home schools, virtual schools, and private schools. Whereas education savings accounts and similar voucher schemes eliminate public and accountability of school and tax dollars. Whereas using tax dollars to pay for tuition at private and religious schools would grow into a costly entitlement program. Whereas a taxpayer-funded voucher program would reduce the amount of state funds available for all schools, harming many rural Texas communities where families have few, if any, private school options. And whereas Texas parents who accept a voucher would lose out on a long list of important parental rights outlined in Texas State Education Code and in federal law, especially protections for students receiving special education services. Now therefore be it resolved that the Greenville ISD Board of Trustees calls on the Texas Legislature to reject any diversion of public dollars to private entities in the form of education savings accounts and similar voucher schemes.
Here.
Okay. Did anybody have any comments other?
I'm just very glad that we are submitting this on behalf of our students and public ed in Texas.
Okay.
So we do need that motion, right?
Yes, we do.
I move that the district adopt the resolution as presented. The Greenville ISD Board of Trustees calls on the Texas Legislature to reject any diversion of public dollars to private entities in the form of education savings accounts and similar voucher schemes.
I second.
With a motion by Ann and a second by Tish. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion passes 7-0. Okay, now we've moved to the meeting where there will be public comment for non-agenda items, but I don't have any cards, so we will move into closed session. Closed meeting will be held for the purposes authorized by the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Section 551.071, concerning any and all purposes permitted by the Act, including but not limited to the following sections and purposes. 1, Texas Government Code Section 551.071, consultation with the board's attorney on all subjects or matters authorized by law. A, consider legal advice regarding personnel issues. B, consider legal advice regarding any agenda action item. 2 Texas Government Code Section 551.074 for the purpose of considering the appointment, employment, resignation, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, termination, or dismissal of a public officer or employee. Closed session pursuant to Section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, or to include consideration of employee resignation for good cause. And at 6:21, we will go into closed session.
second.
The motion by Mike and a second by Roger. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. We have future meetings, Golden Lions Luncheon on April 11th at 11, and that night we have a budget workshop at 5:30, and then our regular board meeting on April 18th at 5:30. And if there's nothing else, we'll be adjourned at 7:12.
Trina, we'll talk to you later, okay?
So,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
you can let her know.
Shannon, that grandson is having a open heart surgery. Can I, so I'll be in Brant and Brian and leaving
You can look at it after.
tomorrow. So I,
That's $7.
yeah, right.
There you go.